But you know, go.
What is going on, sports fam? It's your favorite history teacher, Mr. Parker Ainsworth, here with another edition of F in Sports, the podcast where teachers grade sports' biggest issues. We've got a short episode this week as we're in between the holiday and the new year, but we want to make sure we got you a few gold stars and a few theses. So without further ado, let's dive right in. First gold star is going to go to the Oklahoma City Thunder's Josh Giddey with the rare no-point double-double. That's right, no points, but he had 10 rebounds and 10 assists. Got himself in a weird collection with him and Ben Wallace and a couple other players over the course of the 75 years NBA history that can manage to get a double-double without outscoring the 10 points. It's worth noting the 10 points is the easiest part of this because obviously every time you score a basket, you get 2 points. Second gold star goes to Miss Jennifer King, the first black female game day coach in the NFL, who's actually coached 2 games since our last recording. The Washington football team, after a couple of COVID cases and a postponement, have played 2 games in the last 7 days. But Jennifer King has been on the sideline coaching the running backs for both of them. Shout out to Jennifer King. She's one of 12 female assistant coaches in the NFL this season, and the first black female assistant coach to make it into a game day headset situation. Congrats to her. Shout out to Jen King and the Washington football team, even though the Sunday night was not a great night, doing big things. Gold star to Odell Beckham Jr. and Justin Jefferson for their matching LSU shirts. I love the LSU camaraderie here. I also think it's worth pointing out that they clearly knew the moment the LA Rams played the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday. Justin Jefferson in that game set the record for the most yards in the first 2 seasons by a wide receiver. Worth pointing out that that record was previously held by, yes, Odell Beckham Jr., another LSU product. Kind of in a similar circumstance for both. Looks like Justin Jefferson's going to be struggling to make the playoffs again after a second, again, record-breaking season. Kind of like those first couple years for Odell Beckham in New York. Worth pointing out that maybe more goes into it than just wins and losses for a receiver. Also worth pointing out that both of these LSU guys were extremely under-recruited LSU guys. Beckham was a 3-star out of New Orleans. Justin Jefferson was a no-star recruit, and they're both at the top of the record books, setting NFL records for most yards in their first 2 seasons. Congrats to Justin Jefferson and Odell Beckham for recognizing the moment and the team camaraderie. Last gold stars are going to go to another pair of guys doing something really cool on Sunday. We're giving them to Lane Johnson and Terrence Steele for big man touchdowns. You heard that right. Big man touchdowns. Offensive linemen Lane Johnson and Terrence Steele both caught touchdown passes in the course of their blowout victories on Sunday. Philadelphia Eagles beat the New York Giants handily, as did Dallas Cowboys over the Washington football team on Sunday night. Both of these NFC East champions did manage to pull away. It was a rollout to the right with the tackle leaking out, tackle eligible type of play. Very similar play calls for both of them. We love seeing big men score. Shout out to Lane Johnson and Terrence Steele. All right, as it is this week between the holiday and the new year, we're going to go with no detentions this week, no negative vibes. Could we throw out some negative vibes? Absolutely, but we're not going to do that this week. We're just going to get ready for the new year and enjoy the holiday season. Speaking of the holiday season is upon us, and my bookie is in the giving spirit with 12 straight days of giveaways. Every day there's new exclusive promotion for you to redeem, and the best part is it's all free when you sign up and make your first deposit with my bookie. Between December 21st and January 1st, so this whole week, you can bring in the new year right with giveaways that can help you fill your stocking with cash this season. From odd boosts to casino chips to straight locks, my bookie's 12 days of giveaways is a can't miss promotion. And that's not all. To get started, my bookie is matching all first-time deposits with $1,000 with our promo code FINSPORTS. That's FINSPORTS. That's double your funds to double your winnings and get in on all the best action at my bookie. Don't miss out. Double your first deposit up to $1,000 by using promo code FINSPORTS. Head to mybookie.com, place your bets, get in on the best 12 days of the year today. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with my bookie. All right, so we got a couple of theses to read this week. The first one is going to be, or the first two, I should say, are going to be quotes from different people in sports that kind of bring up some interesting ideas. And the last one's a thought I had over the weekend while watching football. So without further ado, let's dive in. First, we're going to start with some basketball. All right, so over the weekend, Stan Van Gundy, former coach of the New Orleans Pelicans, former coach of the Detroit Pistons, former coach of the Orlando Magic, and a few other stops along the way, Stan Van Gundy said that in the NBA, achieving a triple-double does not mean the player played well. If you know me, you probably could have guessed my take on this, but I'm going to give that thesis an A, so let's dive in. All right, the thesis reads, as Stan Van Gundy said over the weekend, in the NBA, achieving a triple-double does not mean that the player played well. So first, we're going to start with what a triple-double is. For the uninitiated, it is achieving 10 or more in 3 different statistical categories. So 10 or more points, 10 or more assists, 10 or more rebounds, 10 or more blocks, 10 or more steals. I guess technically you could throw turnovers in there, but those aren't things you want, so we don't really throw those in. It's a very, very fun stat to keep track of. Obviously, Russell Westbrook is the king of it. He has averaged it for 4 of the last 5 seasons. And I think it's interesting to point out that outside of Russell Westbrook and Oscar Robertson many decades ago, it's kind of an anomaly type stat. We've seen it increase as usage rates have increased across the NBA in the last 15 years. But generally speaking, across the 75-year landscape of the NBA, outside of those 2 guys, you really don't have this happening a whole lot. Like when Jason Kidd would get 10 triple-doubles in a season, it was like, oh man, that's a great season. Now that's kind of, oh, he's the guy that has the ball the most on that team. And so I will say that this is probably even more true now as the stats become more and more devalued. I think one key issue with the triple-double as far as determining if a player had a good game or not an impactful game or not, but a good game or not, is that it's too basic. It utilizes simple counting stats. You've got guys that just add up their 10 points, add up their 10 rebounds, add up their 10 assists, but you don't take into any sort of account the types of situations those things are happening in. So like if 6 of your 10 points happens in the fourth quarter once you're down by 25, who cares? It doesn't take into account any of the situations about the rebounds where, like, yes, you got a bunch of rebounds, but like, was your teammate boxing out and letting you walk up and grab the ball, or were you actually hustling for the ball? Were you boxing your man out? Those, like, there's no articulation as to those things in the basic counting stats either. And then with the assist part of this too, it's also interesting, worth pointing out that like some of the best plays in basketball are actually like the hockey assist pass, where you pass to one guy and it forced the defensive rotation, they pass around. It also doesn't take account to any great pass you throw, the guy just misses the jump shot, right, where you drive in the lane, make a great kick out, and the guy just misses. Those kinds of things are all not factored into a triple-double. Other part of the assist thing that I've always had an issue with is actually that when you pass to a guy and they foul him, if he makes his free throws, you don't get the assists either, even though theoretically, anyway, I have a problem with that because you did pass to a guy scoring and he doesn't get assists because he doesn't get the basket, but you led to the, anyway, I have a real issue with that, so I don't like that one either. But what I will say is an issue here to me seems like as we've gone on and the usage rates have gone up, more and more single creator initiator types are dominating the ball in a way that like Westbrook and Harden and Kyrie and LeBron and these scoring, playmaking type of players are more commonly found throughout the NBA in a way that they weren't maybe before the year 2000, right? You had a much more traditional point guard, a much more traditional shooting guard, a much more traditional small forward, and those every one of those positions had a role and ran a different type of offense. In a modern offense, it's whatever position you want to call my best player. If I've got Jason Tatum, he's going to get the ball in the wing and he's going to attack, and we might set a screen for him to attack or something, but he's going to puncture your defense and he's going to kick out to wherever you rotate over to help. And that's a very common offense that everyone is running in some form or fashion. There isn't a whole lot of people running Reggie Miller off a bunch of screens like they used to. Even Steph Curry, which you could call close, is doing a lot of the penetrating kicking himself. Also worth pointing out that while he's doing that, when he's not doing that, he's running off of the screens like the Reggie Miller style thing. You got Draymond Green doing Mr. Triple-Double. As far as the point forward types go in the NBA, will be running through the same kinds of things. And so I see this as a very, very basic stat. I also think it's worth pointing out that because we value it to a certain degree, and there are certain things written in contracts, and we keep track of who's got how many on the season, and we keep track of who's got how many all time, and this and that and the other thing. You've got situations where guys let their teammates get rebounds, or guys intentionally start feeding the ball to this, that, and the other type of situation just to help their buddy get the triple-double. And while I do like that as a teammate perspective, I like the idea of like, oh, my buddy gets an extra $100,000 if he gets a triple-double this season. I'm going to make sure I let him grab this rebound. That's being a good teammate, and frankly, it kind of exploits the system in a good way for the players. I will say that those kinds of things have also developed in my head. When we go back to the 2017 season and MVP Russell Westbrook is on his MVP chase and getting all these triple doubles, the amount of statistics coming out about how many uncontested rebounds he had as far as getting into the real weeds of analytics on it were fascinating. It's not to say that anyone is always going to have contested rebounds and have zero uncontested, but he was having a lot of uncontested rebounds while guys like Steven Adams were holding opponents back, letting him go get the ball to make sure he got to his triple-double. And those kinds of things are always kind of throwing asterisks, but not asterisks, and always making me kind of wonder, do you really need to value this like we value it, and those kinds of things on stats. The other bit of this is that there's an aspect of triple-double that is selfish, and I understand basketball can be a selfish game. I mean, at some point in possession, someone's going to say, I'm putting this ball in the hole no matter what, if there's a defender there or not or whatever, right? Like, I get that that's an aspect of basketball. But the same way that like Rajon Rondo has had selfish leading the league in assist types of seasons, or the same way that diving at the basket and attacking the defense and whatever can lead to selfish scores. A triple-double is a selfish stat. I mean, you'd rather get the assist than the hockey assist, than the good play, than the whatever, because it's feeding into your triple-double count, right? It's the same way that you'd rather you go get the rebound as opposed to you, I don't know, being in the proper position on the help side or going and boxing a guy out or whatever to make sure you get your triple-double. So I do think there's some aspect of that. The last thing I'll say is that if you look at guys across the NBA that like regularly get the triple-double currently, obviously you have Russell Westbrook at the top, Harden's fairly high up there, Chris Paul is fairly high up there. These are guys that traditionally are close but no cigar when it comes to winning, with Russell Westbrook potentially being even further away than that. And I think that that's worth pointing out as well, because typically, like, Harden has been very close to winning, Chris Paul has been very close to winning. Together they were very, very close to winning the whole thing, but they didn't, and they play in this style where it dominates and gets a lot of triple-doubles. Russell Westbrook, the season he averaged a triple-double, they got a 6 seed, and they got bounced in the first round in a 5-game series. Like, this is not a winning formula. It is a dominant formula. It's a formula that indicates a player had a lot of control and say over a game. But I think the narrative that it means he had a good game is worth examining. I think Stan Van Gundy is right on in this, and so that's why the thesis gets an A. All right, in a similar vein, our second thesis comes from Deion Sanders' tweet over the weekend. Now, Deion Sanders tweeted this out, didn't say it to anyone, but he did tweet it out from his verified Twitter account. Coach Prime said, Trevon Diggs should be the NFL MVP, or at least in the conversation. Defensive Player of the Year is already at his crib. Stop playing NFL and just make a most valuable quarterback, please, so you can continue to shower your highest paid players. This man is doing what hadn't been done in a long time. Now, I'm going to give that thesis like a C+. I'm sitting like a C+, and let's dive in. All right, so I gave this thesis a C+, and it's really kind of twofold because it's kind of split into two parts. And so I want to start with the first part. The first part is when Deion said Trevon Diggs should be the NFL MVP, or at least in conversation, Defensive Player of the Year is already at his crib. All right, I'm not sure Defensive Player of the Year is at his crib. Now, people listen to the show know that I'm a Cowboys guy. People listen to the show that know that I have been a big fan of Trevon Diggs this season. He's had a great year. As of the time recording this, he now has his 11th interception on the season, and that is tying the Cowboys franchise record, and it puts him 3 away with 2 games left from the all-time NFL record for interceptions in a season that is currently 14, set by Dick Night Train Lane in 1952. 2. So that's a long time standing record because, frankly, now you see guys just stop throwing at these kinds of guys. And so I think that that's fair to point out that it's a 70-year-old record that Trevon Diggs is going toward. But the reason people keep throwing at Trevon Diggs, unlike they do other guys like the Revises of the world and so on, is because he's also given up more yards where he's the primary defender, or the way they're statting that out on Pro Football Focus is things like the closest defender when the catch is made. He is giving up the most yards in the league in that category as a defender. And so that's also worth pointing out. I think that he is a high-risk, high-reward, gambling type of cornerback that goes for it all and tries to bait these throws, and he doesn't always win. He does often win, and that's why he's got 11 interceptions. That's why the Cowboys defense is playing so well. He has a number of other pass breakups and so on as well. But I hesitate to say that the guy giving up the most yards thrown his way is necessarily going to get the Defensive Player of the Year award. I wonder if he's even the closest thing to the Defensive Player of the Year on his own team. I watch the Cowboys play fairly regularly, and I have to say Micah Parsons, I think that, the Lawrence Taylor comparisons are a little steep, but he is having the kind of season where he is both rushing the passer and dropping back in a pass and playing the run all at the same time at an elite level. Like, Parsons has the Defensive Rookie of the Year locked up for sure, but I wonder if he really is more in the running for the Defensive Player of the Year award than people realize. And worth pointing out that on CBS's, they did an anonymous coaches poll, or coaches and personnel poll, and it does look like he is in second on their poll. It looks like to me that's worth pointing out. Parsons and Trevon Diggs are on the same team, and a lot of the good things happening for Trevon Diggs on the back end are happening because of the chaos that Micah Parsons and, to his credit, DeMarcus Lawrence are causing on the front end of the Dallas Cowboys defense. And so I think that the Micah Parsons role in modern football is probably more important because he's doing more things, and I would probably hedge some there. I also think it's fascinating to see a linebacker-sized guy do things at all three phases of the game, where he's rushing the passer like a defensive end, covering and stopping the run like a linebacker, but then occasionally they'll drop him to a true Tampa 2 and send him straight down the middle of the field like a free safety. And it's really fascinating to watch this type of athlete that can do all three things. And that's just staying on the Cowboys roster. We haven't even jumped over to the Pittsburgh Steelers and TJ Watt. Well, the Steelers have had a somewhat, disappointing season for what they expect year in, year out. TJ Watt really has had a tremendous Defensive Player of the Year caliber season all over again. He's leading the league at 17.5 sacks, which is more than he had last year and more than anyone else in the league. He has 17 tackles for loss. He has gotten in on 54 total tackles. He's got 31 QB hits. He's got a lot of different stats going his way, and I don't think when watching TJ Watt, the stats articulate quite well exactly the way he dominates a football game as a true linebacker, I guess I'll say, at the line of scrimmage. I think it's worth pointing out that he is also in this category. As much as Deion's going to love the corner from the Dallas Cowboys, I think that it's worth pointing out that TJ Watt is having another Defensive Player of the Year type season, even if the Pittsburgh Steelers are not having a great year. Now, as for the latter half of Deion's point, where he says stop playing NFL and just make an MVQB, so most valuable quarterback, please, so you can continue to shower your highest paid players. I think this is where Deion's point shoots up to the C+, because that's an A. That half of the thesis is an A. The quarterback position disproportionately wins the MVP award. Since the year 2000, we had Marshall Faulk win it in 2000 as a running back. Then we had Shaq Alexander, Danian Tomlinson win it back-to-back years in the mid-aughts as running backs. And then we had Adrian Peterson win it in 2012 as a running back. Other than that, it's been all quarterbacks. It's been Kurt Warner, Rich Gannon, Peyton Manning, Steve McNair, Peyton Manning again, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers. Boom, 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 all up and down, like quarterback. And frankly, a lot of the same quarterbacks. And I understand how much a quarterback impacts the offensive half of a football game. I even understand how an offense can slow down a defense in a way that it's hard for a defense to do the same to an opposing offense. But I just have to say that I feel like giving the MVP award so frequently to a quarterback in modern football negates the idea of what value is to me. I look at like what Indianapolis is doing and see Jonathan Taylor leading the league in rush yards, rush touchdowns, and rush attempts. And that implies so much value for a team that, I mean, yes, the quarterback position is great and all, but like you could put a bunch of people where Carson Wentz is sitting and have Jonathan Taylor doing what Jonathan Taylor's doing this year, and it changes the game up for them a whole heck of a lot. Also worth pointing out, I just have to throw this in there because he got hurt earlier this season, that it's crazy that Derrick Henry is still in the top 5 in all 3 rush yards, and rush touchdowns categories. As a guy that got hurt several weeks back and is not going to play again unless the Titans make the playoffs, that's impressive. And frankly, had he continued on that track, would also be putting Derrick Henry in this type of situation. Those are teams that rely differently on their quarterback than their running back, and they put a lot of the focus in their offense on their running back, and therefore the running back has more of an impact and more value. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the only way to do this. I just think it's worth pointing out that those types of teams do exist, and we probably need to hold on to that and not just give it to the quarterback who has the most wins at the end of the season. Someone like Cooper Kupp is leading the league in receptions, reception yards, in receiving touchdowns, and is transforming his own role with, yes, he's got a new quarterback in Matt Stafford, but he is opening up in all kinds of different ways. Yes, he lines up traditionally in the slot, but he also lines up on the outside. He also lines up in the backfield, sometimes falls out to the flat. He has a bunch of different things and is therefore very valuable because of his versatility and how the LA Rams use him, and defense have to account for him in a way that makes him extremely valuable. Now, does Deion have a point that those are also all offensive players, and maybe I have my own bias on the offensive side of the ball and those kind of things? Probably. Could you look at it and think of someone like TJ Watt again as a hyper valuable player on the defensive side? And maybe that means most valuable because can you imagine how many points that team would be giving up without TJ Watt on the team and how many losses they therefore would have? Absolutely. Could you look at the impact of Devin White or Levante David on the Tampa Bay defense and be like, oh man, look at how crazy that defense is. Look at Levante Davis in there being the middle linebacker, controlling the whole thing. Or Devin White's played all the games, so maybe that's fair. Whatever the case may be, oh man, look at the value there. Absolutely. But this idea that it just goes to the best quarterback on the top team, or just the quarterback on the team with the most wins at the end of the season, whatever, is outplayed. It's done. It's over. It seems to be the case every year. And that's where I think Deion really has his better point. So this thesis lands at about a C+. I think that's a really strong point. And his first point was, so C+ to Deion. Don't tell Coach Prime I said so. I don't want to get in bad favor with Coach Prime, but C+ to Deion.
Okay, Parker, so the thesis statement for this commercial is James Harden has the best beard in sports. What do you think about that thesis statement?
Oh, I give it an A. You know, as a Houston guy, we seem to have an affinity for our beards between guys like him, Dallas Keuchel, lots of big beards in the Houston area. What do you think about the thesis?
So I'm a Jets fan, and I absolutely love the beard that Ryan Fitzpatrick has. So maybe I would give Ryan Fitzpatrick the nod over James Harden. But you're talking to a couple of bearded teachers, and we know a thing or two about making sure that you maintain that mane. So check out the Beard Struggle. The Beard Struggle, they make oils, they make balms, they even have this heated comb to make sure that you get your beard straight so that you're looking fresh.
I know I've really enjoyed using the oil they make for my quarantine beard of sorts. It's nice and long these days, but it helps keep it nice and healthy and hydrated. And if you're listening to our show, you can use FN Sports 15 and get 15% off your oils, your balms, your shampoos, conditioners, whatever you need to use to keep your beard looking healthy.
Absolutely. Check out the Beard Struggle at thebeardstruggle.com. Whether you're just starting to grow or you have a luscious mane already, the Beard Struggle's got all the products that you need. The Beard Struggle. Feast your face.
All right, our third and final thesis is short, sweet, and to the point, but it just popped in my head after watching football over the weekend, and obviously, if you can't tell, I watched a lot of football over the weekend. The thesis reads that the Cleveland Browns need to put Baker Mayfield on the shelf. I'm sitting here thinking that's like a B as I read it, so I'm going to give that thesis a B. Let's break it down. All right, fourth-year pro Baker Mayfield sits in the backfield, taking snaps, with a clearly battered, bruised, and beaten body. The Browns are 7-8. Worth pointing out that one of their 7 wins Baker Mayfield didn't actually suit up for. They're 4th in the AFC North, but are weirdly not mathematically out. 8-7 is currently in the playoffs. The Ravens are 8-7 and in the 7th seed. Without working out every single tiebreaker, there is a real situation where the Browns could win out and get to 9-8, and you could have some giant tie with they and the Ravens and Cincinnati and so on all sitting up there around 9-8 because a couple of the teams play each other this year. Cleveland's last 2 games were against Pittsburgh, who we've talked about a couple different times now, has kind of looked like they're falling apart down the stretch this season. And then to play Cincinnati, who they had a big and easy win over earlier this season, and they get them at home. I have to imagine that that's a game that Cleveland needs to count as a win, not just to have a shot at making the playoffs and backing their way in, but just because for some moral victory points of having beaten them so badly earlier this season, you'd hope that you can finish out on a win against them at home. I want to look at Baker's stats, though, as far as how he's played in this 500 season since he got hurt, because he sat out week 7. I think we can all assume that if he sat out week 7, whether we got hurt more before or more after or whenever more injuries happened, that's about the time when the injuries started piling up to a degree that he felt like he needed to sit down. Since sitting out in week 7, he's broke 65% completions just twice and been under 55% completions 3 different times. He's thrown 8 interceptions, notably 4 against Green Bay on Saturday, and he's had 16 different sacks to just 15 different times he's rushed the football. Baker's mobility is a big part of who he is, and if he cannot move around back there, he clearly cannot be the same type of passer. If he can get out of the pocket, his passing completion percentage is going to drop. If he can't get out of the pocket, he's going to throw it to the wrong team a few more times. If he can't get out of the pocket and run away from people, he's going to get hit in the backfield and taken down for a loss. That's just the reality of how Baker plays football and what it looks like to see this guy hobbled back there in the backfield. I think it's worth pulling him out to see if you can get him healthy over the course of a couple weeks and see if Keenum can jumpstart you and get you into the playoffs, right? And Keenum's lone start this season, he was 21-39 with 199 yards and a touchdown and just had the 1 sack. Also pointing out he was 8-12 for 81 yards when he came in as a sub in the New England game. They're getting blown out and they pulled him in. Keenum is a guy that's played this role a couple different times in his career, and I think it, on the grand scheme of things, that pulling him in now and putting Baker on the shelf for a couple weeks either helps Baker get healthy long term. You can reassess in a couple weeks if Keenum wins a couple games and gets you in the playoffs. Do you reassess, right in the hot hand, putting the health guy back in, so on. And I just think that you're either going to lose out on this season with a hurt Baker or roll the dice on seeing if you can get in without him. And I think it's kind of time for them on the long-term investment to see if they can get in without him. Looks like they have 1 more year left to pay him. They have a lot of money owed his way next year when he signed. But he is an unrestricted free agent in 2023. And I feel like if you're looking at his contract and ways to pay him, that it looks like you probably ought to just go ahead and protect your asset because you invested a lot into this guy, and thus you're going to have to ride him potentially long term. I mean, you can't gamble and think that, but in 2023 we're going to pull in, Aaron Rodgers because he's unhappy, or we're going to pull in Russell Wilson. Like, those kinds of things, as weird as it is that a couple have happened lately, don't seem to happen frequently enough that Cleveland can bank on pulling one of those guys in. And if you're going to really be invested in Baker, I think it's worth protecting his long-term health before he gets rattled around too much back there and sitting him and rolling your dice with the next guy. I also think that it's worth pointing out that these Cleveland Browns maybe need that swift kick in the tail. I mean, they've been underperforming all season, with the exception of the big win over the Bengals or big win over the Bears or whatever. They really, by and large, have kind of had a disappointing season for, again, this is like the 3rd or 4th disappointing season in the last half dozen years, if you're really looking at like what everyone thought was going to be a resurgence of Brown football. And so I would say at this point you might need to just cut your losses, call it a year, and see if Keenum can back your way in. And if he can't, he can't. But I think it's time for them to look into that. Friends, that is another short edition of F in Sports. Do you feel like you're caught up on the sports from the weekend, from holiday weekend, I should say? If you're enjoying things on the Belly Up Sports Network, be sure to go check out the Broadway Hat podcast. It's a great look at the New York Rangers. It's a very, very in-depth look, I should say, at the New York Rangers. It's a great show, but run by Kyle. Kyle's a great guy, so go check that one out. If you've got thoughts on the show, be sure to find me on social media. You can find me at Painsworth512. That's PAINSWRTH 512 on Twitter and Instagram. That's my personal stuff. That's where we're posting all podcast episodes, things I'm writing, things I'm featured on, or, various things like L's on sneakers, things like the Texas Longhorns, Houston Rockets, Dallas Cowboys, and so on. Astros talk shouldn't happen for a while until the lockout's over, so we'll talk about that. Then, as far as this show, you can find this show on social media. On Instagram, we're at F_N_sports, and on Twitter, we're at FNSports, so that's FINSPORTS, number 2, all one word. If you go to those social media pages, you'll be able to find links to our merch store. Yes, our merchandise store. You can find all kinds of different apparel. We have charitable donation t-shirts for several months now. December is a special Flunk Hunger collection in which you'll be able to find t-shirts that the proceeds go to the Feeding America Food Bank. As for January, our January charity is going to be Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We have a role model t-shirt and sweatshirt you're able to get on the merch store. We always have other FN Sports classics, so make sure you go check out the merch store on our social media handles. Again, on Instagram, we're at F_N_sports, and on Twitter, we're at FNSports2, FINSPORTS, number 2, all one word. Be sure to like, subscribe, download, rate, review, do all the wonderful things that help the podcast out. And remember, whatever you do, don't flunk with us. Later, guys.